5th grade. Today we're going to be doing Module 1, Lesson 10. So yesterday we learned all about adding decimals, and today we are going to be talking about subtracting decimals. So it's very, very similar to the previous lesson, but now we're just subtracting. So I think we'll do really well with this today, and let's get started. First, we are going to subtract the unit forms of these decimals, and then we will be doing the standard form. So very much like the previous lesson. So we're going to start off with this unit form. And again, just like the previous lesson, when you're working on your problem set, you're probably going to see something similar to this. Remember, in the very last space, we'll write the answer in standard form. And then over here, we'll be writing part of our answer or our answer in unit form. So let's start off with this first problem. I am subtracting 5/10 minus 3/10. And in this situation, since both of my units are the same, I can just go ahead and subtract. And without looking at the units or getting myself confused with anything, I'm basically just looking at those numerals and subtracting those. So if I have 5 minus 3, I think about what is 5 minus 3, so I can use my fingers if I need to. Subtract 3, and that leaves me with 2. So then that leaves me with 2/10. Now, my answer is currently in unit form, and I don't want to leave my answer in unit form because I normally want my answers as a decimal in standard form. So to do that, I'm going to take 2/10 and write that as a decimal. So if I have 2/10, this 2 should be in the tenths place. And to show that it's in the tenths, I'll put a decimal right there with a 0 right next to it. So this reads as 2/10. And that is the answer for this question. So far, not so bad. Now, for my next problem, and make sure, of course, that you're writing down all these notes. Make sure you're labeling them as well so you know that these are your Lesson 10 notes. If we take a look at the next one, I'm going to be figuring out how many ones I have, plus how many thousandths that I have, and then finally I will write that answer in standard form as well. So for this problem, I have 7 ones, 5 thousandths, and 2 ones, 3 thousandths. I'm subtracting these two. So remember, I just want to subtract the numbers that have common terms. So for example, the 7 ones I would subtract from the 2 ones. So if I take 7 ones minus 2 ones, or just 7 minus 2, that leaves me with 5. So 7 minus 2 leaves me with 5. So I'm left with 5 ones. Then I need to think about how many thousandths I am left with. And again, I'll take a look back at my numbers. So I have 5 thousandths. And I have 3 thousandths. Since they have common terms, I can subtract them. And I can just think of this with the numerals. I have 5 minus 3. 5 minus 3 gives me 2. And now I have my answer in unit form. So I have 5 ones and 2 thousandths. So now I need to write this as a decimal in standard form. So to do this, I'll have my 5 and my ones. I'll put a decimal here. I do not have any tenths, so I put a 0 there. I don't have any hundredths either, so I'll put another 0 there. And finally, I have a 2 in my thousandths place, so I'll put the 2 in my thousandths place for my final answer of 5 and 2 thousandths. And that's all we need to do to solve this problem. Now for this next one, I want you to try to do this next one on your own. I'll set it up for you, and then I'll have you try it by yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to be figuring out how many hundreds I have, and then how many hundredths. Make sure there's a big difference between hundreds and hundredths. So make sure you're paying attention to that. And then I'm going to figure out what that number looks like in standard form. So go ahead and solve this problem, 9 hundredths, 5 hundredths, minus 3 hundredths. Solve this using this right here, and then write your answer in standard form. All right, so you should pause the video and then unpause the video so you can check the answer to this problem. So since I have 900s, and I'm not subtracting any other hundreds right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this as 900s because I'm not subtracting anything else. But my hundredths, that's where it gets a little bit different. So in this problem, I have 5 hundredths minus 3 hundredths. So this is, since they both have the same common term, they both hundredths, they both have the same units, then I can subtract them. So I have 5 minus 3 again, which gives me 2. So I am left with 9 hundredths and 2 hundredths. And I need to now write this as a decimal. So I have 900. So I have 9 in my hundreds place. I don't have any tens. I don't have any ones. I need to put a decimal because I'm not moving into my decimal place values. And I don't have any tenths. There's no tenths in here. But I do have 2 hundredths. So then I'll write in my hundredths right there. And this leaves me with 900 and 2 hundredths. And that's the final answer to this problem. If you had any confusion or any questions about these first 3 problems, subtracting in unit form, please let me know and I can help you out with that. But if you are ready to move on, let's take a look at these next 2 problems. So for these next 2 problems, we have 8 and 3/10 minus 6 and 4/10. So I will set this problem up in what we call a standard algorithm. That's just when our numbers are stacked up and we are solving them like this. Remember, when we are stacking up our numbers that are decimals, it's very, very, very important that we always line up everything by their place values and line up the decimal as well. So my tenths are lined up, my decimals are lined up, and my ones place is lined up. Everything is where it should be, so I can now solve. Now, I need to start subtracting. I always start all the way to the right, and I'm trying to subtract 3 minus 4. Now, when I'm subtracting 3 minus 4, it's kind of like I have 3 fingers up, and I ask you, take away 4 fingers. Can I do that? No, because I only have 3 fingers. I can't take away 4 if there's not an extra one there. So what I need to do is I need to borrow from the next place value. So to do that, I cross out the 8 ones, and since I'm borrowing 1, this 8 will become a 7. So it's kind of like I do 8 minus 1, and it becomes 7. Then, since I borrowed 1 whole, that 1 whole becomes 10 tenths. So it's kind of like I'm adding it to this 3 right now. So instead of just having 3 tenths, I now have those 3 tenths plus the 10 tenths that I just borrowed, that 1 whole, and that leaves me with 13 tenths. And now I can do 13 minus 4, so I can do that now. So if I have 13 minus 4, that leaves me with 9 tenths, and I will leave that number right here. And if you're having a hard time with subtraction, you could always think of 4 plus what equals 13. That's another way for us to think about these problems. And then I'm going to bring down that decimal so I don't forget about it. And finally, I'll solve for this part. Remember, we're not doing 8 minus 6 anymore. We crossed that out because we had to borrow from it. So now we're just doing 7 minus 6. And if I have 7, I can take away 6, and that just leaves me with 1. So I take 7 minus 6, which leaves me with 1, and my final answer is 1 and 9 tenths, or 1 and 9 tenths. All right, let's try this next problem, and then after that, you will have 3 problems you'll be trying on your own. For this next problem, we have 9 and 2 tenths minus 6 and 4 tenths. Everything is lined up by its place value, so my tenths are lined up, my decimal points are lined up, and my ones are lined up. I can now start to try and subtract. I am first left with 2 minus 4 again. If I have 2 fingers up, I can't take away 4 because I don't have enough. So I need to borrow from the next place value. So I'm going to cross off this 9 ones. I'm going to take one of the ones and use it to help me subtract in my tenths place. So since I'm doing 9 and I'm taking away 1, that would leave me with 8. So I now have 8 ones. And since I took 1 whole from my ones place value, that 1 whole is now going to become 10 tenths. So those 10 tenths get added to my 2 tenths that were here already. I'm going to cross off this 2, and this 2 becomes a 12. If you either didn't remember or are just noticing, you're always basically taking this number that you cross off and you add 10 to it. So if I have 2 and I crossed off the 2 will then become a 12 because you do 2 plus 10, which gives you 12. All right, now we can finally go ahead and subtract in my tenths place. So I have 12 tenths minus 4 tenths. 12 minus 4 is going to leave me with 8. I could also think of it as 4 plus what equals 12, and that can help me. That's another way to help myself out. So I'm left with 8 tenths. Make sure that my decimal comes down. And now I'm going to subtract in my ones place value. Remember, we're not subtracting 9 minus 6. We crossed out that 9. So I'm actually going to be subtracting 8 minus 6. And 8 minus 6 will give me 2. So I'm left with 2 ones and 8 tenths for a final answer of 2 and 8 tenths. All right, so you should have all these notes down in your notebook, and I'm going to give you the problems you'll be doing on your own. So these 3 problems are going to be like your exits to the problem set, so you need to make sure that you complete these 3 problems I'm about to give you, and then show me your work. So we have 831 thousandths minus 292 thousandths. Make sure that you're remembering to line up all the place values when you're subtracting these 2 numbers. So 831 thousandths minus 292 thousandths. Then you'll be doing 4 and 83 thousandths minus 1 and 29 thousand, 1 and 29 hundredths. And finally, you'll be subtracting 6 minus 48 hundredths. This one's going to be extra tricky. Pay attention to how you need to line up your place values. And remember that rule we keep talking about. If there isn't a number in a place value, you always fill it with a 0 and work with that instead. So solve these 3 problems, check in with me once you're done, and then you'll move on to your problem set if you got those right. So if you have any questions, please let me know, and great job today.